Welcome to Kind All the Time. It's Time To's podcast where we are flipping the script on mental wellness and starting the tough conversations. Real talk about resilience, emotional well-being, and building the skills that actually make a difference. It's time to start the conversation.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brian Ceccarelli, founder of the It's Time To organization, and we are here today with Kate, who is a middle school counselor at the Dayton STEM School, and she mainly deals with young students from 6th through 8th grade, and we're here to pick her brain a little bit to find out what's happening in that age group. So Kate, thanks for being part of this today, and hope to gain some knowledge from your expertise.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. So Kate, as you know, our program focuses on mental health and bullying and teen suicide. And at least it's been my experience that the age group that you tend to seems to be the age group that struggles the most. Would you find that to be true?
Definitely. And I would say it's worse now compared to when I first started. I've been a school counselor for 10 years now. They're going through a lot of difficult times right now.
I know that you went through COVID with this age group, and certainly COVID really affected a lot of people in a lot of ways. Do you feel that COVID had a big role in mental health, not only then, but continuing into now?
Yeah, it's actually surprising in a way the effects we're still seeing from that. Just in terms of our students' attitudes towards school in general, a little bit of, apathy in a way. And just in general, like a lack of resilience, I would say, in some of our young people, of just feeling like there's no way I can get through this, or this is the most difficult thing I could have ever experienced. You know, I have no one to lean on, or just not having faith in their own strength and coping strategies.
So, you know, when we talk to young people after our presentation and we get questions, one of the most common comments that we hear is the pressures that these young people are feeling. Where are these pressures coming from? Are they intrinsic pressures? Are they extrinsic pressures? Where are these pressures coming from? I don't know that I clearly understand what they are.
I don't know if I have like a clear answer on that either. I think it depends on the family. It depends on the child. It depends what type of pressures that they're feeling. For some students, you know, there's a lot of pressure around things like sports. For some students, there's a lot of pressure around their academics and their grades, and that they feel like they have to go to an Ivy League school or something like that. I think a lot of students struggle with comparison, and whether that's with social media or face-to-face, of just comparing themselves to their peers and feeling like they're not good enough, not cool enough, not pretty enough, just not measuring up. So I think the pressure comes from a lot of different places, but a lot of times it is intrinsic. And I will talk to students or talk to their parents, and they'll say, no, this isn't my parents saying I have to have all A's, it's me. So it kind of depends, I think, on the scenario, but they definitely are under a lot of pressure.
Well, you know, I look at it, and I'm in my 60s, and I look back and I think, well, we all wanted to do well in sports. We all wanted to get good grades. We all wanted to aspire to be something more. So what's different? What's changed? Is it the home situation maybe, or more kids coming from maybe broken families where they don't have the family nucleus like we used to know maybe? I'm just trying to understand these pressures.
I don't know if this is like a scientific reason, but like my opinion at least is that I think we just have so much more access to information now with the internet, and with like just our circle of people is so much larger than it used to be like back in the day. So I think about my grandparents, you know, they grew up and they had, you know, their circle and their community was within a mile radius of where they went to school, where they worked, where they lived.
Right.
And now, you know, I can easily within a few seconds look up what people are doing across the world.
Right.
Or compare myself or feel competitive in a way of what other people are doing or what I should be doing or could be doing. And so I think sometimes it's just like we have too much information and our brains don't know how to process that in a healthy way.
Right. Well, that makes total sense, because if you think about it, your smaller group that you probably compared yourself to was a very tight-knit, small group.
Right.
And now with social media and posts and all these social media platforms, you can compare yourself to people all over the world in an instant. And I think that definitely has some impact on how students perceive themselves, don't you think?
Right, definitely. I think about myself as an adult trying to process that information, and then compared to an adolescent, you know, their brains are not fully developed to be able to even comprehend or have the perspective of like the things we see online maybe aren't fair to compare myself to.
Sure.
So,
well, let me narrow in on a couple topics. Bullying. I mean, bullying's been around forever. But it seems like bullying has become more of an issue, even with cyberbullying. Do all schools have anti-bullying policies? Is that a state-mandated law or a rule?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. There's certain protections, even federally, around different topics, around harassment, like sexual harassment, bullying, around, you know, different things with race and religion and gender. You know, there are certain classes that have protections. And so I believe, yeah, all schools have to have a specific policy in place. And usually it's a board policy that they would have on their school website or in like this student handbook.
So if you were a parent who had a child that was being bullied and you find out about it, either they tell you or somebody else tells you, how would you handle that as a parent firstly? And then if they approached you as the counselor, how would you handle that?
Right.
So handle it, put on two hats.
Sure.
You're a parent and a counselor.
So I think it's first important to figure out, is this truly bullying or was this a moment of meanness? Because sometimes we're quick to label things as bullying because there was a moment where someone was very mean, which obviously isn't cool. It's not okay. But bullying has a specific definition. It has to be something that's repeated, it's ongoing, and there has to be some sort of power imbalance where maybe there's some intimidation happening or some threatening happening, and it's happening over and over and over.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes I'll have students come to me and say, I'm being bullied, I need you to talk to this student, but there really was only like one incident, which, not to diminish, you know, that situation happened, but it's not necessarily considered bullying at that point, and so it's a different type of conversation. So talking to your child about like, how long has this been going on? What specific things is this person doing or saying? Have there been other people who have witnessed this? Like almost kind of trying to collect all of the information, the data, the evidence in a way.
Sure.
Because it's really helpful if you feel like it's to a point that you want to go to the school to kind of have all your ducks in a row of like, this is the full situation, because that can kind of just help the school district address it faster. So I would say as a parent, really just trying to gather all the information and listen to your child from an empathetic perspective. A lot of times we can jump into wanting to like fix the problem for our child. But I think a lot of times children, especially teenagers, really just want to be heard. And so they're not always looking for a solution. They're not always looking, you know, even when they come to me as their counselor, they're not always looking for me to do anything. And so I think sometimes it's helpful to start those conversations by saying things like, do you want me to listen or do you want me to help you problem solve? Are you just looking for a shoulder to lean on, a listening ear, or do you want me to do something about this? So sometimes that can kind of help the student feel like they have control over where that situation is going. But obviously, as the adult, we need to know when it is appropriate to like step in or not, even if our child doesn't necessarily want us to. We need to make sure that they're safe and that they feel supported and comfortable at school so they can focus on their learning. So then I guess putting my counselor hat back on, if a parent were to reach out to me, it's helpful, like I said, just to have a lot of information of whatever the parent can gather of what's been going on, the history with the situation. And then typically what we would do is at our school district, the procedure usually is that whoever is told the information would bring it to an administrator. So in our school, we have a dean of students and we have a principal for each building. And so we meet very regularly, and so we would bring that to their attention and do some sort of like internal investigation, which sounds super serious, but
Sure.
We're just looking into, whether there are other students experiencing this or have witnessed it, and then trying to figure out how to best address it. Making sure that, once we look into it and say there is a consequence for the student who is said bully, that when that person returns to school, there aren't any, they're not lashing out at the person who reported or who was the victim in the situation. So making sure that that person is protected as well. Sometimes we might even change schedules for the students or make sure that there are safety plans so they're not interacting, they're not accidentally grouped up for a group project or
Sure.
things like that.
Sure.
So again, every situation's a little bit different, but we just try to make sure that the parent knows that we're there and that we're going to hear them out, but ultimately, most importantly, that the student feels safe and like they can focus on their schoolwork.
It's interesting you brought up a point where you said frequently students just want to be heard. Mm-hmm. And we did a roundtable discussion with a bunch of students one time. And one of the key points that was made by a student is that their hesitation to reach out to the parent is that parents want to immediately intervene. Mm-hmm. And you brought that up. And they said, really what we want is just a listening ear and know that they're there for us if we want to utilize them for something more.
Right.
And so we talked to another counselor at one point about a similar topic, and this is for parents that are listening, is one of the key points is you don't want to corner your child. You don't want to bring something up in a car while you're driving where the door is closed and they have nowhere to go. You don't want to go into their room, close the door behind you and say, I'm not leaving until you tell me everything. So it's being available for them, knowing that you care and that you're willing to help if they want help. Is that a good point?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I really like to give parents the tip to try to have conversations side by side rather than face to face. So if there's like an activity that you can do together, whether it's cooking or a puzzle or playing video games or watching a TV show, something where there's no eye contact required. A lot of times teenagers, especially boys especially, respond better when you are not necessarily looking at each other face to face and they can talk about their emotions and not feel as like on the spot, if that makes sense.
Almost having a conversation rather than an interrogation.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think that's probably a very legitimate point.
Yeah, and that works for adults too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let's continue with a couple scenarios now. So how do you handle a parent who approaches you and says, look, I've noticed my child is regressing in school. They don't seem to have an interest in things that had previously gathered their interest. They don't seem to be communicating with their friends as much. And they tell you these things. How do you help a parent navigate that situation? Because those are all alarming signs, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And as a parent, that's a very overwhelming thing to notice and to even know where to begin. I think our first instinct is like, oh my goodness, I need to go have a really serious conversation and we need to fix this right away. But it's not that simple. Mental health is kind of a roller coaster and it takes a lot of time to get to a better place sometimes. So I think conversation obviously is very important. When parents reach out to me about this sort of thing, I try to approach it with a lot of empathy and making sure they feel heard, because as a parent, it can be a lot to wrap your head around as well. So yeah, definitely never hesitate to reach out to a school counselor, just because it might be a good sounding board to figure out where to begin. Same thing with your family pediatrician. I will oftentimes tell parents to start with that as well. But just trying to figure out, like, from a holistic view of what is going on with the child. It is helpful, I just last week had this exact type of conversation with a parent, and so we actually had a sit-down meeting instead of talking on the phone, just because sometimes it's easier, to kind of talk face-to-face, and we ended up pulling the student out of class and into the conversation, which was really nice. So I was able to facilitate and kind of help the parent talk with their child about it, help advocate on the child's behalf a little bit, because sometimes students are a little worrisome about sharing certain things with their parent for whatever reason. A lot of times they say, oh, I just don't want to get in trouble. Or they're so worried about their parents' feelings that they don't want to say something that might upset their parent.
Or disappoint them.
Or exactly. And so sometimes it's nice to kind of be a weird, like, liaison, I guess, in a way, between the student and the parent, and trying to help with those conversations. And so in that situation, like I said, I met with the parent, I met with the student, and then I was able to kind of meet with them together and come to a sense of understanding. What's hard is that there wasn't necessarily one specific thing going on that we could address.
Right.
There were a lot of different factors at play. But it is helpful to kind of get all of the different support people in that child's life on the same page. Just especially so we can all kind of keep an eye on things and make sure we're all paying attention if there are any big red flags. And then obviously referring to counseling if the child is open to it.
Yeah. And I think the key point in what you just said is, I think parents have to realize there is no easy button.
Right.
It isn't a one and done, okay, we had a conversation, everything is going to be fine now.
I wish that was the case.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an ongoing problem when we know with a number of young people that go to the ER every year with mental health issues or self-harm, or number of young people that take their lives every year. There is not an easy fix, but it's a good way to start the conversation and hopefully change the direction of where a child may be going. Mm-hmm. Now, another scenario. So we have heard in the past that some of the reluctance that young people have in going to a counselor is that the counselor is immediately going to call my parent and tell me everything I just told them. And I don't want my parents to know. Mm-hmm. So how do you navigate that circumstance? Because I got to believe that a parent would want to know, but yet you don't want to compromise the trust of the student who's telling you things, hopefully in confidence.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
It is very difficult.
It's got to be a tightrope.
Yeah, it's a balancing act all the time. I would say I try to be really intentional, about building relationships with the kids outside of my office first. And that's a luxury that I have as a school counselor versus a mental health counselor or therapist, because I have lots of fun and silly moments with the students outside of the counseling hat being on.
Sure.
So I'll be out in the hallways, just talking to them about nonsense, whatever they're into at the time. Right now we're planning a talent show, so lots of fun conversations about what songs they like and things like that. So I think that there is a level of trust with my students already built, and that they have a pretty good awareness of like what my role is at the school. We try to intentionally go into every classroom at the beginning of the year and talk about confidentiality and how that works. And so they know going into my office that there are certain topics where I would have to break that confidentiality. And so Can you elaborate on what those are? Sorry. So if a student is thinking about hurting themselves, if they're thinking about hurting someone else, if they're in danger in any way, or if they give me permission to share. So if a student says to me, I'm really stressed out about, my parents have been fighting a lot and da 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 da, do you mind giving my parent a call and talking to them about how stressed I've been? Then sure, that's easy peasy.
Sure.
It's more when students are sharing, I'm having thoughts about self-harm, I'm having thoughts about suicide, but don't tell my mom, she's going to be so mad. Those are the difficult moments. And I think I just have to remind myself in those moments that I'm the adult and I need to do what is right to keep the student safe.
Yeah.
And even though the student in that moment might be angry, might be upset, might be freaking out that their parent is going to find out about these things they just shared with me, in the grand scheme of life, in the big picture, it's the right thing to do to make sure that they're okay. And so I try to have those conversations with the students to make sure that they're understanding before they come talk to me about where the boundary is. But then once something is shared that I have to break confidentiality, making sure they understand why and how much it is hard for me to, as their counselor, to break their trust and that I care about that. And usually those conversations go pretty well. They understand.
Right.
And usually when students are at that point, they want their parents to know. They know their parent needs to know.
Sure.
They maybe just don't know how to go about that conversation. And so oftentimes once we're at that point, they're weirdly relieved, I think, that I'm the one that's going to tell their parent.
Right.
And that they don't have to be the one to somehow try to figure out how to bring it up.
Well, and it's an interesting point that you bring up is that we often present the scenario to students that what if your friend is self-harming? Or what if your friend says, hey, we're going to shoot up the school? We always tell the students, you have an obligation to report that immediately, not tomorrow, not I'm going to think about it. You have an obligation to report that immediately. And to an authority in the school, right? Isn't that how you would recommend? Yeah. So let's shift gears one more time.
Sure.
Now, what if you have a third party, meaning a student comes to you saying, hey, look, student B, so student A comes to you. I have a friend of mine, student B, who's having problems. They're not self-harming, but they're starting to talk about their depression, anxiety, feeling like they're worthless. How do you approach that? Do you actually take that information and somehow reach out to student B who may be struggling? Or do you just let it work its course until student B says, I need help from Kate?
Yeah, I definitely seek it out. I would say that the vast majority of my job is those types of scenarios, that our students are looking out for each other and they are coming to their counselors saying, hey, I'm really worried about a friend. Can you check on them and make sure they're okay? So a lot of times when I'll talk to that original student, student A, I will ask them, do you have any specific examples of what they're saying? Because oftentimes students are talking over text messages or on Snap or something like that. And that makes those conversations a lot easier if they actually have screenshots they can show me. And so if I can have a screenshot that says, I'm thinking about hurting myself, it makes my conversation with student B a lot easier to say, hey, I've got this, what's going on, versus well, so I hear you're struggling. So a lot of times I'll ask, do you have anything you can show me about what the student is saying or doing? Why are you concerned? And then I'll go ahead and pull that second student and try to have a conversation while protecting the first student's privacy. I don't want to say, well, this student said, you said. So that's a little bit hard sometimes to navigate to protect confidentiality there. But, sometimes they can figure out who it was. But we try to navigate that just to make sure that everyone feels safe and protected in that scenario too, so they're not afraid to come to us and tell us things as well. So when I check in with that next student, just trying to make sure that they're okay and see what's going on, get to the bottom of it. But regardless of what that student says, so even if they say, no, I'm fine, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to call their parent. I'm going to make sure that they know, hey, we got this report at school today that somebody's worried about your child, said that your child is saying XYZ. I don't know if this is true or not. They're denying it when they're talking to me, but I just want to make you aware so you could have a conversation at home.
Sure.
Just because, sometimes kids panic and they do lie. And so I'd rather be safe than sorry with that sort of thing and inform the parents.
So one of the other things that we've heard from schools, and it's not the situation at Dayton STEM because you have a counselor or more than one there. What do you tell students that don't have a counselor at their school? I mean, some of the rural schools, some of the inner city schools, they may have a counselor in there once a week or some service that contracts with the school where they don't have this personal relationship with the counselor. How do you maybe help students navigate that situation?
My heart goes out to those students because I can't imagine trying to navigate, the world right now without feeling like you have someone to talk to. So I would encourage them to try to identify who their trusted adults are.
We refer to it as our MVP.
Your MVP. Person. I love that.
Right.
So whether that's a coach, whether that's a Girl Scout leader, whether that's a pastor, a parent, an uncle, a cousin.
Right.
Trying to find someone in your life that you can lean on. In terms of like specific mental health treatment and things like that, of like an actual counselor, I would encourage a student to try to bring it up next time you have like a physical or a checkup with your pediatrician. A lot of times pediatricians are now doing anxiety and depression screeners with students. Sure. And so oftentimes they'll ask parents to leave the room when that's happening, and so that's an opportunity for students to be honest. If they are really struggling with those things, that might be a good time to bring that up, not because we're seeking medication or anything like that, but just because that might be a person that has training to support you with that and can help you get connected with a therapist outside of your school building if that's not possible. There's also a lot of resources online. We talk about the internet as if it's a bad thing sometimes, but, there's 988. There's lots of different support lines and websites, chats you can use. I guess I'll just also say to make sure we're monitoring who we're talking to online. Right. I'm starting to hear more students talking about using AI as a support tool, as someone to talk to, which is really interesting. But I would just caution students from using that because that is not a real person who has training of how to support you, especially when it comes to heavy mental health stuff. And that conversation could go any direction. Yeah, and there have been reported cases where AI has directed a young person or more than one person to actually instruct them how to take their life. It's kind of terrifying. So, that's not the direction we want to go when we have trained professionals who know how to implement skills and tools to help young people. So I would be very cautious of that as well. And to elaborate on your trusted adult, I think it's very important to identify a trusted adult, or as we say, your MVP, prior to having a problem. Mm-hmm. Identifying a person now that's important in your life that says, if I did have a problem, I think I could reach out to my aunt, my uncle, the religious leader, the coach, whatever, and even start that conversation with them to say, hey, look, if I ever had a problem, would it be okay if I brought it up with you so that they're there, that they're available for you when maybe you least expect it. I love that idea. So I think it's important to do that. And we challenge students to identify their MVP like right after the presentation. And if some people don't have an MVP, and we've had people to raise their hand and say, I don't have that person in my life. And I think that that's when it's important, maybe as a counselor at a school or a teacher, that you can say to that student, hey, I'll be your MVP if you need to talk to somebody. Right. Pick me. Yeah, pick me. I'm willing to do it, right? Is there any topic, Kate, that you feel that we haven't addressed that you would like to talk about? I know we've talked about social media being a plus and a minus. Are there any things that you see with social media that is weighing on this age group? We could probably do a whole podcast about that specifically. I think just the amount of screen time in general, whether it's social media, whether it's Netflix, YouTube, whatever,
Video games.
all of it. Our students need to get outside. That's my personal biased opinion.
Sure.
But
and I think that's supported by science.
I think that
research.
our students are spending a lot of time alone. They're spending a lot of time indoors. They're communicating with friends, but a lot of it is online, where they're on FaceTime or they're on, Discord or things like that while they're playing video games. And so it's just not, it sounds very old school, but it's just not the same as a face-to-face conversation. And so
And it's not healthy.
Yeah. So as much as you can encourage your children to have limits, they're going to hate you, but they need it. They need boundaries. Our students and children of all ages thrive with structure and boundaries. And so the more, you can set limits around that of, you can have video game time after you've done X, Y, Z, or you can only have 1 hour of video game time per day, whatever it is that makes most sense for you and your family. But the more we can push our students to do social activities that are outside of the home, outdoors, whether it's sports or things like that, I think the better too.
Yeah, and I think that finding a hobby that you really like and what you're really good at, whether it be journaling, whether it be writing music, writing poems, playing a sport, running cross country, whatever moves the needle for you, you should really get involved in. And the less time that you could spend in front of a screen where you're isolated. I mean, face it, people think they're not isolated because, we can communicate. We have friends online. But in a way, I think we're even further isolating ourselves. And I won't say most times, but certainly sometimes you don't even know who's on the other side of that conversation.
Right.
And you go down a rabbit hole that you didn't really want to be in, and you don't know how to get out of it. So I think that's important as a parent, like you said, monitoring their screen time. In fact, one of my grandkids just got a phone. And I immediately had a conversation with my daughter about apps that you could do to monitor your child's time on the phone, texting, sites that they go to. Because at the end of the day, and I've used this analogy quite a bit, when your kid turns 16, we never give them the keys to the car and say, okay, you're on your own. Here it is. Go do what you want.
Right.
But yet we hand them an even more powerful tool in a cell phone. And if you don't monitor it, they're going to get in trouble, whether they want to or not.
And kids are sneaky.
They're very sneaky. And it has long-term ramifications. We know that. So, Kate, I want to thank you so much for sharing all the information you did, and your knowledge in this area is certainly excellent, and I appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything you would like to close with in talking to parents?
I think just having as much quality time as a family as you can is so important. I know that sounds really cheesy, but
it's not cheesy.
Just having dinner together as a family, with me and my family and my kids, it feels really rare. It's hard to make that a priority, but I think at the end of the day, it's really important, and it helps build those connections. So that way, when your child, if your child is in crisis or has something big on their heart that they need to talk about, that they know that you are present and that you are there.
That's great advice. And, to the parents listening, I would say it works both ways. When you're out to dinner with your child and you're on your phone scrolling through the camera or responding to a text or on the phone talking to somebody about where you're going to golf tomorrow, your kid is also aware of that. So if you're preaching to them, let's have some quality family time, I think it's important you leave your car in the phone or your phone in the car and leave it somewhere where it's not available for you to be distracted from time with your child. So in closing, I would like to thank everybody for tuning in to today's podcast. And thank you again, Kate, for sharing your information.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.